Hey everybody, check it out. This is the brand new Audi Q4 Sportback e-tron. And in this video, we're gonna find out how does this all new electric Audi stack up against its competition.
But first, a word from our sponsor.
It took a while to get up here. We started out around 1959. But we didn't do all that just to get here. We did it to give you a truck that'll take you anywhere. This is the new Nissan.
So what is the Q4 e-tron? Now you may have heard of Volkswagen's new all-electric crossover, the ID.4. I say new, it's actually been around for a couple of years now. Well, the ID.4 rides on a platform called MEB, and this is the Audi version, the Q4. Now it comes in two very distinct models, the standard Q4, which has a squared off rear end, and this model, the Q4 Sportback, which has this sloping rear end. Get the Sportback model over the standard one, you're gonna pay a few $1,000 premium, and the Sportback starts at $56,800. It's also only available in Quattro all-wheel drive. Now the standard Q4 you can get in a single motor rear-wheel drive setup, but if you want the Sportback, it's Quattro all-wheel drive only. You're probably wondering at this point, how far does it go on a single charge? It has an 82 kilowatt hour gross battery pack, of which about 77 kilowatt hours are usable, and it's rated at 242 miles on a single charge, which is about 6 miles more than the all-wheel drive Q4 with the standard rear end. It's time to take the new Q4 Sportback for a spin. Now, I want to show you this vehicle's party tricks. So we do of course have a panoramic sunroof, and you can slide the shade open at the slide of a finger, but unlike some of this vehicle's competition, like for example the Tesla Model Y, you can also open it up and let the fresh air in, which is really cool. I mean, if you're into that kind of thing, it's nice to have that option, but I think for this video we'll probably close it up just to keep the sound nice and consistent. All right, now my kind of first impression is that I like the interior a lot more than the exterior. Now the exterior, especially in the non-Sportback version, has a lot of ID.4 in it because, you know, it's based on the Volkswagen ID.4. The Sportback's a little bit better in differentiating, but the interior feels entirely new. And if you are looking at buying the Q4 over the ID.4, this is really where the penny drops. Is the interior good enough to justify the additional price? And is the driving experience good enough to justify the additional price? The lockable charge port is located on this vehicle on the right rear quarter panel, and when you open it up you find both the J1772 and the CCS connector. Now, what about charge times? Audi says from 5% to 80%, takes 36 minutes on a DC fast charger, peak charge rate 150 kilowatts. Now, with the included charger, a full charge will take right around 9 hours. However, this thing has a beefy 11.5 kilowatt onboard fast charger. And if you have the ability to charge at your house at 11.5 kilowatts, this thing will fill up in 7.5 hours. Now, one of the most interesting design elements in this car, in my opinion, are the wheels, and specifically what's behind the wheels. This one is a 2022 model, however, 2023s are showing up at dealerships very, very shortly, so wheel options may change a little bit. But check this out, this is a 20-inch wheel with drum rear brakes. I think this is the only car in history to offer 20-inch wheels and drum rear brakes. In fact, I can only think of 3 new cars sold in the US that offer drum brakes whatsoever. The Volkswagen ID.4, which is of course a sister car to this, the Toyota Tacoma, and then the Q4. Now Audi says this car doesn't need disc rear brakes because 90% of the braking force comes from regen. I've also heard the argument that the drum brake is better for the environment because it captures all the brake dust. It's not going into the atmosphere. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. But seeing a drum brake behind a 20-inch wheel is pretty unusual. The front end of the Q4 e-tron is pretty unique, and this grille is enormous, but not functional. You see, Audi didn't need the full cooling capability of that enormous grille, so instead it's just here as a design element, which is pretty interesting. A couple of different colors as well. The real cooling happens underneath the bumper there, and there's actually basically a shutter. It's like a fabric shutter that comes down when it's not needed. Now these headlights, a couple different headlights, including a matrix LED design, and you can configure the daytime running light on the matrix, which is just fantastic. I think that's a really cool feature. I really hate these fake side vents. They're just not my thing. And this color combo is my favorite. The white against the black just gives it kind of a cool stormtrooper look. The rear of the Sportback has some really cool design elements, including this long continuous LED taillight and the spoiler, which kind of makes its way partway up the rear glass, but you can see underneath it via this little strip. And my favorite bit is the e-tron, which is molded into the rear bumper. Now, storage capacity is an interesting story actually, because you'd expect the Sportback to have less than the standard model. However, it has more, about a foot more. This has 26.1 cubic feet of space behind the second row. And the reason it has more than the standard one is because of the way they do their measurements. You can't measure any room above the headrest in the back. And because the Sportback has got a little bit of a sculpted rear end here, it has a little bit more capacity than the standard model. Now in practice, you can't stack boxes or stuff up nearly as high, but that's the reasoning behind that. Now, other cool things back here, you got a little bit of a false floor with some extra space underneath, and this onboard charger includes both level 1 and level 2 dongles so that you can stay charged on the go. I really enjoy that quite a bit. No spare tire in this vehicle, and then the seats do fold down as well. 300 horsepower thereabouts is pretty decent. And it should be quick enough for just about anyone out there. And for 2023, all Q4s, by the way, get the S-Line kind of appearance group. So they're all going to be S-Lines. Here is the stop sign. Going to give it some beans. Woo! All right, pretty good. So you really kind of get a nice push at right around 30 miles an hour is when you get the kind of most squirt of acceleration. Starts out kind of tame, and then when you're driving along, got plenty of passing power and a very smooth power delivery. I like their accelerator programming. Now in terms of regeneration, got a couple of things going on. In standard drive mode, you can use the paddle shifter to select 3 different regen modes when you come to a stop, and you pull the left one all the way back to activate the most regen, or using the drive selector you can go down into B and lock it in the max regen mode, which offers, I think they said 0.15 G's of deceleration when you're coming up to a stop. Now I could use a little bit more. It is probably good enough for one pedal 60 or 70% of the time, but I still find myself going to the friction brakes a little bit too much. Vehicles like the Ioniq 5 offer a lot more off accelerator regen, and I would appreciate that in the Q4 e-tron. Now from the outside, there are clear similarities between the Q4 e-tron and this vehicle's sister car, the ID.4, but what I appreciate is that on the inside it feels almost entirely different, which is a really good thing because you're paying a lot more money for the Q4 e-tron. It starts at $48,800 in base trim, whereas like an ID.4 starts at $37,000 and some change, so like $10,000 more, but you definitely get some big improvements on the inside. Now to start the vehicle up, simply put your foot on the brake pedal, and now the car is running, and we see a nice mix of kind of digital screens along with some more analog controls. So first thing that I noticed right away was this digital instrument cluster. It looks so cool. It's very configurable. I love having the map screen on here. It shows you some good information. Not only does it show you its estimated range remaining, but it also shows you state of charge, which is good, and just love it. I think it looks great. Now the steering wheel almost looks like a TIE Fighter. It's got a flat top and a flat bottom, similar to like the new C8 Corvette, similar to the Allegro, which was an old British car, kind of having this interesting shaped steering wheel, and the buttons will come to life when you turn the car on the steering wheel as well, which is a nice touch. The best part about this car though is it doesn't use the Volkswagen infotainment screen from the ID.4, which is so troublesome. I really dislike it. The Audi system is much more intuitive in my opinion. It's also just much crisper. It looks so good. It's fairly quick, and I just love the graphics on it. It's very intuitive, and also the volume control is better, and now it's not a knob, which is a little bit of a miss. I'd much prefer knob, but you've got this little rotating thing which you can kind of spin, and it's better than the ID.4 system. And then below that you actually have hard controls for the climate system, which is, yes, thank you Audi for giving us those, which is great. Now underneath the kind of MMI system is this floating panel, which is where you find your drive selector. It almost looks like a little tic-tac box. You push it forward and backwards to engage the different drive modes. There's a button for park, and then you have traction control off, drive select. One thing I don't like about it though is it's lined in piano black, which is quick to get dirty and fingerprinted. Now the ride quality is a little bit firm. We are running on the biggest wheels available, these 20-inch wheels. They look great, but you do tend to feel most bumps, and I actually think the seats themselves are a little bit firm as well. I prefer kind of a softer cushion in my luxury-oriented vehicle. One thing I do like a lot though is the steering. It's a very direct steering setup. It's got variable ratios. It's actually got the smallest, I almost said shortest, but the smallest turning circle of any Audi offering. So if you want to make tight turns, this is a better turning circle than even the Audi Q3. And you do feel that out on the road. It's got a very good steering setup. Now let me go into a different drive mode. Let's make this turn here. Let's try putting it into dynamic. Give it another squirt. There's 30, 40, 50, 60 there. Yeah, it's not a rocket ship, but it's plenty fast for 99.9% of people. And then now that we're done accelerating, let's go ahead and put it into comfort and just let her cruise. Now there's also a cool setup in this vehicle. So the rear motors are all the same on all the Q4s. However, the front motor on the all-wheel drive model will basically become inactive at highway cruising speeds, right, to maximize efficiency, because you don't need it. It's only there when it's called upon, just to make sure it's the most efficient as possible. And speaking of efficiency, the Quattro versions of the Q4 all have a heat pump, and the rear-wheel drive models only have an inductive heater. The back seat of the Sportback has some really good things and a couple of not so good things. So first of all, the floor completely flat and incredibly useful. You've got power outlets back here for charging up some USB-C devices. And look at the legroom. The legroom, this is my seating position at 6'1". I've just got acres of it. However, the headroom is a big problem. Now this is a big drawback to the Sportback. There's just not enough of it. Now the standard model fixes that problem altogether, but this is not very good. Now Sportback to standard model, wheelbase is the same, overall length is the same, but obviously headroom is much worse in the Sportback. The new Audi Q4 e-tron is on sale right now. However, the 2023 models are coming next week, so be sure to stay tuned for those. As always, this has been Tommy with the Fastlane EV and the Fastlane Car. Check out alltfl.com for everything new car reviews.